Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The date is 16th Rabiul Thani 1447 on the Islamic calendar and 9th October 2025 on the Gregorian calendar. And you are watching Muslim World News with me, your host, Abdurrahman Muhammad. Let's dive in headfirst and take a look at today's headlines. Wajir West MP decries selective justice. Madagascar president unmoved by country-wide protest. And on business, Kenya targets to narrow 32 billion shillings trade deficit. And on sports, Egypt, DR Congo, Angola qualify for AFCON 2025. For our first story today, the Member of Parliament for Wajir West, Yusuf Farah, has threatened to take legal action against the government over its plan to compensate victims of police brutality following the Gen Z demonstration, calling it selective justice. In a letter dated September 29th, Farah wrote to President William Ruto warning that he is planning to take the government to court if the proposed compensation for victims of demonstration and police brutality will not include the 1984 Wagala massacre. The selective approach to justice offends the principles of equality, fairness, non-discrimination and inclusivity as enshrined in the Constitution, read part of the MP's letter to the Executive Office, under which plans for monetary remedy are being discussed. Farah said the state's plan favors cases after 2017, while survivors of the Wagala massacre and other abuses are left out. The 1984 Wagala massacre stands out as one of Kenya's most painful episodes of state violence. Security forces rounded up men from the Somali community and held them at the Wagala airstrip in Wajir, where many were tortured, denied food and water, and eventually killed. Human rights groups estimate that thousands may have lost their lives, though the government never provided official figures. Calls for justice and reparations have lingered for decades. In the 1990s, President Daniel Arap Moi was reported to have made a pledge of compensation. President Uhuru Kenyatta publicly apologized in 2015. Despite the acknowledgements, survivors and affected families maintain that no compensation has been given. The Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission later confirmed the atrocities and urged reparations, but its recommendations remained largely unimplemented. On to our next story right here at home. The Office of Director of Public Prosecutions has approved charges against 9 suspects and 2 medical facilities in a sweeping Social Healthcare Act fraud probe, with 5 others additional individuals already under arrest. The probe stems from 1,188 files submitted by SHA and Kenya Medical Practitioner and Dentist Council that allegedly include ghost facilities, fraudulent billing, and misuse of public health funds. 2 facilities, St. Mark's Orthodox Healthcare and Jambo Jipya Medical Clinic, are among those named in the charges: falsification, conspiracy, and misuse of proceeds. Officials from DCI confirmed the suspects will be arraigned on October 6th and assured that further arrests and asset recovery efforts are underway. Health sector observers welcomed the move as a necessary step towards accountability and warned that corruption in healthcare funding undermines public trust and service delivery. With high-stakes prosecutions now unfolding, Kenya's health sector scrutiny is intensifying. The charges may mark a pivotal moment in the fight against fraud in public health. Now moving on to Central Africa, where a military tribunal has handed former President Joseph Kabila a death sentence in absentia. In a ruling delivered by Lieutenant General Joseph Mutombo Katalai on October 2nd, 2025, Kabila was found guilty of treason, colluding with the M23 rebels, and organizing an insurrection. The judges also linked Kabila to the M23 movement, which a United Nations panel of experts say receives support from Rwanda. In applying Article 7 of the Military Penal Code, it imposes a single sentence, namely the most severe one, which is the death penalty, said Lieutenant General Joseph Mutombo Katalai during the sentence hearing. In addition to the death sentence, the tribunal has ordered Joseph Kabila pay tens of billions of dollars in compensation, including reparations to the Congolese state and to the conflict-hit provinces of North and South Kivu. Judges also authorized his arrest despite his whereabouts unknown. Now let's move our focus onto Madagascar, where President Andry Rajoelina of Madagascar has refused to step down as youth-led protests spread across the country. Citizens, frustrated by power outages and water shortages, have clashed with authorities in Antananarivo since late September. Even after a 24-hour ultimatum, the president remains in office while the government attempts talk to ease the unrest. In a speech broadcast on his official Facebook page, President Andry Rajoelina announced that he will remain in office despite nationwide protests that have left at least 22 people dead. No one benefits from the destruction of the nation. I am here, I stand here, ready to listen, ready to extend a helping hand and to bring solutions to Madagascar, said President Andry Rajoelina. While speaking at the United Nations in New York last week, President Rajoelina also claimed that certain politicians were allegedly planning to exploit the protest and might have considered a coup, though he provided no evidence. "What I want to tell you is that some people want to destroy our country," he said. The youth-led Gen Z movement rejected President Rajoelina's speech, calling it meaningless and warning they would take any necessary action if he failed to meet their demands within 24 hours. Additionally, the protests have spread beyond the capital, with demonstrations reported in the northern cities of Mahajanga and the southern cities of Toliara and Fianarantsoa. Now an update on news that has been trending. Israeli naval forces intercepted the global Smooth Floatia on October 2nd, detaining around 450 activists aboard over 50 vessels in what has triggered global outrage. Participants included journalists, medics, and activists from over 44 countries. All were taken to Ashdod for processing, with many demanding their immediate release. Cities around the world erupted in protests: Rome, Milan, Paris, Buenos Aires among them, with demonstrators condemning what they call criminal blockade and calling for accountability. Human rights groups and legal analysts warn the interception likely contravenes international maritime laws and the principles of peaceful humanitarian missions. Organizers and activists vow to continue the mission, demanding the release of detainees and asserting the right to break the Gaza naval blockade. The confrontation has brought renewed global focus to Gaza's suffering and raised key questions about the boundaries of protest, sovereignty, and humanitarian rights at sea. Now let's take a look at Indonesia on devastating news. The death toll from the collapse of a boarding school building in Sidoarjo, Indonesia, has risen as recovery operations intensify and dozens remain missing. The collapse occurred during afternoon prayers at Al-Khozini Islamic boarding school, where students had gathered and were caught under rubble amid ongoing unauthorized construction. Authorities said about 49 students remain unaccounted for. They have now commenced use of heavy machinery to accelerate debris clearance. Despite earlier concerns about structural risks, rescue officials said the thermal drones and sensors had yielded no signs of life, indicating the mood at the site has shifted from rescue to recovery. Investigators are examining structural failures and possible illegal constructions. DNA samples are being collected to assist in identification of body remains. As the country mourns, Indonesia faces urgent questions about building safety and oversight to prevent more such tragedies. Now we move our focus onto Japan, where Sanae Takaichi has won the leadership of Japan's ruling party, positioning her to become the nation's first female prime minister. In a runoff, she defeated Shinjiro Koizumi 185 to 156, following the resignation of outgoing leader Shigeru Ishiba after electoral setbacks. As leader of the LDP, the dominant party in the lower house, she is expected to win a parliamentary vote by mid-October to formally take office. Supporters hailed the milestone in a country long criticized for low female political representation, calling it a breakthrough for gender barriers. Critics warned that her conservative stance on nationalism, security, and resistance to key gender reforms may temper expectations for progressive change. Sanai Takaichi's ascent marks a historic shift in Japan's politics, but how she will balance conservative roots with demand for modernization remains an open question. From stories of real life and real human faces, let's take a look at numbers and statistics on business news, where the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority, EPRA, has announced plans to scrap the monthly electricity consumption limit imposed on electric vehicle charging stations in a move aimed at accelerating e-mobility growth across Kenya. Currently, EV users and charging operators are capped at 15,000 kilowatts hour per meter each month under the special e-mobility tariff. Charging firms say this limit discourages investment and restricts expansion. EPRA data shows electricity consumption under the tariff rose sharply from 1.26 gigawatt hours in 2024 to 5.04 gigawatt hours by June 2025, reflecting rising demand as more Kenyans shift to electric transport. By mid-2025, the country had 6,442 registered EVs and nearly 300 charging stations, though their power use accounts for just 0.04% of national consumption. The regulator is reviewing the tariff to align it with market growth. If approved, the changes will give fleet operators and charging businesses more flexibility, while encouraging private investment in charging infrastructure. Officials argue the reforms support Kenya's climate goals, including a pledge to cut emissions by 32% by 2030, also lowering transport costs for consumers in the long term. On our next business story right here at home, Kenya is losing about 50 million shillings every year through undeclared miraa exports. A new report reveals that large consignments of the stimulant leaves the country without proper documentation, denying farmers fair returns and costing the government vital revenue. The losses are linked to illegal levies and a cartel operating around Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. Exporters say the charges, which average 580 shillings per kilogram, make Kenyan miraa less competitive compared to Ethiopia's. Farmers are now calling on the Agriculture and Food Authority and the Ministry of Trade to investigate the matter and restore order in the sector. Kenya resumed miraa exports to Somalia in 2022 after a 2-year ban, but concerns are rising that the benefits are being lost to shadowy dealings. On our next business story, Kenya is seeking to narrow a 32 billion shilling trade deficit with Turkey. Speaking at the Turkey-Africa Forum, government officials say Ankara has become a key non-traditional trading partner, but Kenya imports far more than it exports. To bridge the gap, Kenya is pursuing new bilateral deals, encouraging Turkish investment in local manufacturing and promoting value-added exports such as processed agricultural products. Trade officials stressed the importance of tariff reforms and removal of non-tariff barriers to give Kenyan goods better access to Turkish markets. Exporters, however, warned that high logistics costs and stiff competition still pose challenges. Kenya hopes the forum will deliver practical agreements that boost its industrial base, retain foreign exchange, and strengthen ties with Turkey. The success of these talks will determine whether Kenya can turn the deficit into balanced trade. From numbers and statistics of business news, let's take a look at sports news. Egypt, DR Congo, and Angola have booked their places at the 2025 Africa Cup of Nations to be hosted in Morocco. Egypt sealed qualifications after a 1-0 win over Mauritania, with Ibrahim Adel scoring the decisive late goal. DR Congo also impressed, beating Tanzania 2-0 through two dramatic late goals from Meshak Elia in the 87th and 93rd minute. Meanwhile, Angola secured their ticket with a narrow 1-0 victory against Niger. The results underline the strength of African football, with these nations set to join the continent's biggest tournament next year. And finally, still on sports news, Luka Zidane's son of French legend Zinedine Zidane has officially joined the Algerian national team after switching allegiance from France. The 27-year-old Grandan goalkeeper received his first senior call-up for Algeria's 2026 World Cup qualifiers against Somalia and Uganda. Although he previously represented France at youth level, he never broke into the senior side, opening the door for his Algerian roots to guide his career. Algerian fans have welcomed the decision, believing his experience will add depth and motivation to the squad as they fight for a World Cup spot. Now, before I bid you goodbye, here is something to smile about. Did you know that sharing a laugh with friends isn't just fun, it's actually good for your health. It can boost your immune system and reduce stress. It's one of the healthiest things you can do without even realizing it. Dear viewers, laugh, smile, and stay healthy. If you didn't know, now you know. That brings us to the end of today's program of Muslim World News. I've been your host, Abdurrahman Muhammad, and it's been a pleasure having you with us. But as we've come to the end of our news bulletin, we turn to this week's feature story. We look into a story of justice where Kenya's courts have taken a bold step towards fairness in family life. Now stay informed, stay inspired, and may peace be upon you. Here's Shaban Yusuf with our feature story.
A recent Court of Appeal ruling has sparked a significant shift in how matrimonial property is handled in Kenya, a development that could redefine family law and bring national legal practice closer to Islamic principle of justice and equity. Kenya's appellate judges reaffirmed a central principle in the matrimonial property that property acquired during marriage should be divided based on individual contribution, not automatically split down the middle. This landmark decision goes beyond the surface of financial investments, giving legal weights to non-financial contribution such as homemaking, childcare, and emotional support. For many, especially within Kenya's Muslim community, the ruling represents a long overdue recognition of the full spectrum of spousal effort, a perspective deeply rooted in the Islamic teachings. The traditional approach in Kenyan courts leaned heavily towards equal division, often failing to account for the nuanced role each partner played in building a home. Under the current law, however, both financial and non-financial efforts now carry legal value. This reflects a major philosophical shift. Marriage is no longer seen as a financial contract alone, but as a partnership of shared responsibility. Islam has always acknowledged the vital, though often invisible, contribution of women in the household. Emotional labor, child rearing, and domestic management are considered meaningful acts of service, deserving of reward and protection. In Islam, marital property is not just about who pays the bills, it's about who helped build the home, whether financially, emotionally, or socially. The court's emphasis on contribution-based division is especially significant for Muslim families who often navigate both civil law and Sharia principles in personal matters. However, complexities remain. In polygamous marriage, Islam law is clear. Each wife is entitled to fair treatment and must have her property rights safeguarded. Kenyan courts, while recognizing polygamy under certain circumstances, often struggle with practical enforcement of equitable division among multiple spouses. Inherited properties presents another challenge. Under Islamic law, inherited wealth belongs to designated heirs and is not considered part of the marital estate. In contrast, Kenyan law may allow inherited property to be divided if it was improved or used during the marriage, leading to potential conflicts between the two systems. Historically, many Kenyan women, especially homemakers, were denied a fair share of matrimonial property due to the lack of formal income or ownership. Their efforts in raising children and managing homes were dismissed as secondary. This ruling changes that. It opened the legal door to a more inclusive definition of contribution, validating the work done behind the scenes, often by women that sustain families and build futures. For Muslim women in particular, this ruling echoes long-standing Islamic values that recognize the spiritual and societal worth of non-financial efforts. While the ruling is a major victory, many Muslim families remain unaware of how Islamic law and Kenyan civil law intersects or conflicts on issues of property rights. Legal literacy is crucial. Without it, couples may unknowingly forfeit rights or face prolonged legal battles that could be avoided with better understanding. Imams, lawyers, and community leaders now have an opportunity and responsibility to educate families about their religious rights and legal protection under Kenyan law. At its core, this ruling affirms a timeless Islamic principle: justice. The Quran teaches that men and women are partners in life, each with unique roles but equal in worth and deserving of fairness. By focusing on contribution rather than rigged 50-50 splits, the Kenyan court's decision aligned with the Islamic understanding of marriage as a relationship built on mutual respect, accountability, and shared success. Kenya's recent court ruling on matrimonial property marks a transformative moment in the country's family's law. For Muslim families, it bridges a long-standing gap between secular legal systems and the principles of Islamic justice. As legal systems evolve, they must continue to reflect the diverse values of the people they serve. In this case, Kenya's courts have taken a meaningful step in honoring both the letter of the law and the spirit of fairness that lies at the heart of Islam. Reporting for Al Huda TV, I'm Sheban Yusuf.